Okay, so we're on to module 2.1, subject pronouns or pronomi personali soggetto. Okay, and here's where we're at on the pyramid. I'm just going to show you at the beginning of each module how far you've come on the pyramid. So right now we're at the bottom pretty much. Okay, but don't worry, you will, before you know it, you'll be all the way at the top. Okay, pronouns. What is a pronoun? A pronoun, or un pronome, is a word that takes the place of a noun or phrase. How many kinds of pronouns are there in Italian? There are many different categories of pronouns in Italian, and some pronouns can be used in a lot of different ways. This course will cover only the most essential ones, so as not to be overly confusing. Then you can add more as you progress. Okay, so the point of this course is to introduce you to everything and make sure that you have a good understanding of the fundamentals. And I'm gonna try my best to not overwhelm you with too many details that you just don't need to know at the beginning. So which pronouns will we be covering in this course? We'll be covering the following: subject pronouns, aka personal pronouns; reflexive pronouns, which will be covered along with reflexive verbs; and finally, object pronouns. So we have the direct object pronouns and indirect object pronouns. Okay, so if you don't know what these are yet, we will be going over them throughout the course. Okay. Subject pronouns in English. What is a subject pronoun or a personal pronoun? A subject pronoun, or un pronome personale soggetto, is the who part of a sentence, the person or thing doing the action. Subject pronouns take the place of nouns and proper nouns. Okay, so for example, if the noun, or the person in this case, is Lucy, the pronoun would be she. So she is going to be replacing Lucy in the sentence. So for example, I run home. What's the subject pronoun? I. You have a book. Subject pronoun? You. And he is a boy. Subject pronoun is he, because he's doing the action. Okay. How are subject pronouns categorized? So we can refer to the subject or speaker in terms of three different levels. We have the first, second, and third. And we have two categories, singular and plural. So in the singular, we have first person, which is the from the perspective of the first person point of view, which is the I. I do this or I do that. Second person point of view is you. And third person is he, she, or it. In the plural, first person would be we, okay, because we is the plural of I and somebody else. Second person, we have you. In this case, it's plural because in English, there is nothing to distinguish between singular and plural when you say you, or sometimes I guess in the South, you would say y'all. So second person, singular is you and plural is you. And then third person would be they. Okay, that's the plural of he, she, or it. And note that there is no it or neuter form in Italian. Okay, everything is masculine or feminine. So not like in English or in German where we have those neuter nouns. Everything is either masculine or feminine. Okay, subject pronouns in Italian. What are the subject pronouns in Italian? So we just covered first, second, and third person. So in the singular, we have io. Io means I. Tu means you in the informal. Lui means he. Lei means she. And we also have lei meaning you in the formal singular. Okay, so I will talk a little bit more about this in a bit, but there is Oh, wait, there's some ways to tell if you're talking about lei versus lei, but when you're speaking, they are pronounced exactly the same. In the plural, we have noi, meaning we, voi, meaning you, all, you plural, loro, meaning they, and we also have loro in the formal plural. Okay, you could tell because it's capitalized, just like over here. Okay, but voi is usually used instead of loro in everyday speaking. So you're not really going to be using loro unless you're in the formal, unless you're studying this for business purposes or, in like university or something like that, where you have to write a lot of formal language. Okay, so in everyday language, you're basically going to be using voi for the plural you. Subject pronoun helpful tips. Okay, so I have a few helpful tips here. The first one is, although I is always capitalized in English, io is not capitalized in Italian unless it's the first word of a sentence, just like in English. For example, I have a book. Io ho un libro. So in this case, io is capitalized because it is the first letter of the sentence. You and I are going to the park. Tu ed io andiamo al parco. So in this case, because io is not the first word in the sentence, it is not capitalized. Okay? And you may have noticed that I used a D here, if you're familiar with Italian at all. So I'll just explain real quick here. The letter D may be added to E, meaning and, okay, or A in Italian, becoming id, when the next word starts with a vowel, in order to help separate the two words, especially when speaking. This also applies to a, meaning at or to, becoming ad. So the reason that they do it is because if you don't put the D in here, you'd say tu e io andiamo al parco, and it just becomes a little bit of a mouthful. So it's not required that you add the D, but it is very helpful, and I think it's very useful, especially when you're speaking. But it still means the same thing. It still means and. Okay. All right. Lei and loro are usually capitalized when written, since they signify formal pronouns. However, lei and loro are not capitalized because they mean she and they respectively. Okay, so if it is not capitalized, it'll mean lei means she and loro means they. Okay, if it is capitalized, it means that that's the formal tense. Okay, so lei means she, but lei capitalized means you in the formal singular. Likewise, loro means they, but loro capitalized means you in the formal plural. But like we just said in the last slide, is that you're not generally going to be using this unless you're dealing with a lot of formal language. Okay, so it shouldn't be that confusing. Unlike in English, in Italian, subject pronouns are generally not necessary. This is because once the verb is conjugated, its ending usually tells us who's doing the action. For example, parlo alla ragazza is I talk to the girl. Okay, you can tell because parlo ends in an O. We'll discuss that a little bit further in the next module. Okay, and just another example, parli alla ragazza is you talk to the girl. You could tell because of the ending. But in this case, lui parla alla ragazza, he talks to the girl. You would probably want to leave the lui in here because this can mean he or she or you informal. Okay, so in that instance, you'd probably want to leave the subject pronoun in just for clarification. All right, we have some more helpful tips continued here. So the subject pronoun is retained for clarity or emphasis. However, it is not usually necessary since context will usually help you determine who the subject is. Okay, so another example, we would leave it in for clarity because, as we just talked about in the last example, if you're saying she talks to the girl, lei parla alla ragazza, or he talks to the girl, lui parla alla ragazza. If you leave out the pronouns, it's the exact same sentence. Okay, so parla alla ragazza, parla alla ragazza. So in this case, you'd probably want to leave them in just for clarity. And then for emphasis, I'm going out. What are you doing? Io esco. Tu che fai? Okay, so we're emphasizing the I and you in this case. So in this case, you would leave them in. Lei can mean she or you in the formal singular. You can only tell which is which based on context or if it is capitalized when written. Okay, so she talks to the girl. Lei parla alla ragazza. You, formal, talk to the girl. Lei parla alla ragazza. Okay, do you see any difference? No, you shouldn't because there is no difference. Okay, and then we have how is she? Come sta lei? Or how are you? Come sta lei? So you can tell the difference when it's written out because it's usually capitalized. But if you're just speaking, you have to rely on context. Okay, so you'd have to kind of know if they're talking to you or if they're talking about a girl. Okay, and you can generally move subject pronouns around and they'll still be correct. So that's a little bit different from English. So in this case, how are you? In the informal, you would say come stai tu? Or you can say tu come stai? Or you could say come stai and just take out the two altogether. They all mean the same thing. Another example, he is going out at 7. Esce lui alle 7. You can also say lui esce alle 7. Or alle 7 lui esce. And finally, esce alle 7. And you just can take out the lui altogether. Okay, so all of these are correct, and you see how you can put it there, or there, or there, or you can leave it out. And so it's a lot more flexible than in English. So it makes it a little bit more confusing for beginners, but once you learn it, it becomes easier because you don't have to worry so much about getting the word order correct. Okay, how to use subject pronouns in a sentence. So in English, we in this example, I have them all listed out first. Okay, so the subject pronoun is in red. So in a sentence, you'd have I, you, he, she, you, we, you all, and they at the beginning of the sentences. So in Italian, like we know, you don't have to put them at the beginning, but in this case, I've put them at the beginning just to keep it simple. And I've also put them in parentheses in parentheses so that you know that you don't necessarily need it, unless, of course, you want it for emphasis or clarity, as we discussed earlier. So in this case, the verb I use to be. So in Italian, the verb is essere, to be. So io sono is I am, io sono. Tu sei, lui è, lei è, lei è. Okay, again, these are the same, but one means she and one means you, formal. Noi siamo, voi siete, and loro sono. Okay, so these are your this is a very basic sentence, but it is a complete sentence. So if you want to say I am, io sono, and that can be your first sentence in Italian. Okay, let's move on to the next module, which will be verbs. Okay, we're on to quiz module 2.1, subject pronouns. There's only 5 questions in this quiz, so I will go ahead and read each question and the possible answers, and I'll pause for a few moments to let you try and decide on which is the correct answer. But if you need more time, just go ahead and pause the video. All right, let's get started. Number 1, what is a pronoun? Choose only one best answer. A word that describes an action, B, a word that modifies a verb or adverb, or C, a word that takes the place of a noun or phrase. Okay, letter C is the correct answer. A pronoun or pronome is a word that takes the place of a noun or phrase. Number 2. What part of the sentence does a subject pronoun replace? Choose only one best answer. A, the noun or proper noun, B, the verb, or C, the adjective or adverb. Okay, letter A is the correct answer. A subject pronoun or un pronome personale soggetto is the who part of a sentence, the person or thing, noun, doing the action. They're usually used in place of a name or object in order to reduce redundancy. For example, if you wanted to say, Mary ran home, then Mary played outside, Mary had fun, you could use a subject pronoun in place of Mary by saying Mary ran outside, then she played outside, she had fun. Okay, number 3. Subject pronouns are often omitted in Italian because they're not needed. In which of the following instances would you want to keep the subject pronoun in a sentence? Choose all answers that apply. A, clarity. For example, to distinguish between lui, lei, and lei, formal, when the verb is in the third person singular. B, emphasis. For example, this is what he thinks, but what do you think? Or C, to keep redundancy. For example, we are going out, then we are coming home. We will be hungry, so we will eat dinner. Okay, so letters A and B are correct. C is incorrect because we don't want to create redundancy. We want to reduce redundancy. So the subject pronoun is retained for clarity or emphasis. For example, lei can mean she or you in the formal singular. You can only tell which is which based on context or if it is capitalized when written. Okay, number 4. Paying attention to capitalization rules, which of the following is written correctly to mean she goes to school, I stay home, and you, formal singular, go to work? Choose only one best answer. Okay, so these are all the exact same sentence, just with different words capitalized. So the sentence reads, A. Lei va a scuola. Io sto a casa e lei va al lavoro. Okay, in letter A, the first lei is capitalized, io is capitalized, and the second lei is also capitalized. B, none of the subject pronouns are capitalized. And in letter C, the first lei is capitalized, io is not, and the second lei is capitalized. Okay, so letter C is the correct answer, with the first lei being capitalized, the eo is not, and the second lei is capitalized because it means you, formal. Although I is always capitalized in English, io is not capitalized in Italian unless it's the first word of a sentence. Lei and loro, when used in the formal sense, are always capitalized when written since they signify formal pronouns. However, lei and loro, in the informal sense, are not capitalized unless starting a sentence because they mean she and they, respectively. The first word of a sentence is always capitalized, just as in English. Okay, and number 5. Which of the following are acceptable ways of saying, how are you, in the informal to form or second person singular? Choose all answers that apply. A, come stai tu? B. Tu come stai? C. Come stai? Or D. Noi come stai? Okay, so letters A, B, and C are correct. D is not correct because noi means we. Okay, so you can generally move subject pronouns around or omit completely unless used for clarity or emphasis. In this case, tu is the only correct pronoun to use for the second person singular, informal tu tense, because noi means we. Okay, so how did you do? If there's any that you didn't get correct the first time around, you can either go back and replay the video, or you can reread the answers here. And I will just quickly scroll down, and you can always pause the video if you want to reread one of the answers here. All right, great job.